Afternoon. Just waiting for a few more to join in the session before we start. I was just going to say we do have the chat section running as well in the background. So if anybody does put anything in there, just give us a minute to actually check if there's any questions as we're going through. Paul, I don't know, do you want to start now or give it a couple of more minutes?
Should we give it another minute, so just to see if there's any sort of stragglers to join?
Yep.
I'm just waiting for it to hit 13:03 on my clock, and then we'll make a start. Is it Emma?
Yeah, that's fine.
Oh, it's just clicked. Right, okay. Let's make a start, and if anybody else joins, they'll have to catch up. So, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Paul Peters. We'll do some introductions on the next slide, but welcome to our webinar From Oversight to Ownership, which is very much aimed at executive accountability within cyber resilience. Really pleased that my own company, Norton Consultancy, have teamed up with Positive Cyber Solution to sort of jointly bring you this webinar. So if I start off by sort of introducing ourselves, Emma, do you want to jump in and do your introduction, and then I can sort of continue?
Yeah, that's fine. I know most of you in here know who I am anyway, but my name is Emma Darby. I'm managing director, of Positive Cyber Solutions then, so a company that I've co-founded. And also a cybersecurity trainer, so building some training courses along cybersecurity. ISO 27001 at the moment is what we're focusing on. I'm also a lecturer in cybersecurity and digital forensics, with a special focus on governance, risk and compliance. And PCS supports organisations with compliance auditing, practical cybersecurity improvement, cyber essentials, really. We're also a certified body for IASME, where we audit companies through cyber essentials, or ICAL, IASME assurance, cyber assurance, level 1 and level 2. So yeah, just let that go back to Paul now.
Thanks, Emma. So as I said earlier, my name is Paul Peters. I'm the Managing Director of Norton Consultancy Limited. Up until 11 months ago, I was a Detective Superintendent with South Wales Police. Sort of 30 years in, after 30 years in the police, I retired and then set up my own company. Some of my experience within policing, I've led murder investigations, kidnap investigations. I helped set up the regional cybercrime unit in 2014 and spent 5 years leading investigations into complex and international cybercrime. And then for the last 4.5 years of my policing career, I was responsible for setting up and managing the Cyber Resilience Centre for Wales, which was a police-led organisation which was created to support SMEs and organisations across the regions. So I have a good understanding of crisis management, but also some of the sort of failings, I guess, of businesses in relation to cyber resilience. Okay, so I'm going to start off and just put this statistic up. This is a recent statistic from the UK government, but almost half of all UK businesses have suffered a cyber attack over the last year. And I think it's crucial to sort of understand that it is cybercrime and fraud make up over 50% of reported crime in the UK. So the reality is that as a business, there is a likelihood, a good likelihood, that you're going to suffer a cyber attack. And I think the key thing, hopefully you'll take away from this presentation, is that it's not an IT issue, it's a business continuity issue, and it's an issue that the leadership of your organisation need to take hold of. So understanding the cyber risk in an SME context. It's unfortunate, but too many small businesses really believe that they're too small to be targeted, and it's just not the case. The reality is that the attackers will generally be looking for a vulnerability, and if that vulnerability exists, then you're potentially going to be the target of their attack. And you know, I've had numerous conversations over the years with small businesses who say, you know, why would they attack me? And I think back to one particular business owner I spoke to whose response to me was, who's going to attack a one-man band in Carmarthen? Unfortunately, 3 months later, he was attacked and emailed me for help. All his files have been encrypted. So it does happen. I regularly, I still work with the National Cyber Resilience Centre group, and I still regularly talk to businesses who've suffered from cyber attacks, and they never, ever thought it would happen to them. So we need to sort of lose that misconception, and you know, the press will pick up on M&S, Co-op, Jaguar, Tesco's. You know, when those big cyber attacks happen, they're all over the news. But unfortunately, the press do not sort of consider an attack on a small business newsworthy. So we don't get to hear about those far more frequent attacks. And it's important to recognise that cyber risk isn't isolated. Supply chain disruption means a breach of one of your partners can potentially impact your business. And the evolution of ransomware has changed. So, you know, certainly when I first got into the sort of cyber arena, ransomware was very much something that was sort of sent out randomly. You know, there weren't that many focus attacks. It was very much a random attack. But that's now changed from those simple attacks to highly targeted multi-stage operations, and not just looking to extort you for the data that's been encrypted, but they also look to exfiltrate that data, which adds the pressure on you. And what the attackers will do is, often if they can sort of sit on your network or have access to your laptops, then they're looking to sort of understand your business, because they want to know how much that they can extort you for. And if you did have cyber insurance, they're probably looking for that sort of cyber insurance document to know how much you're covered up to. And you know, so they research you and they sort of monitor you. Coupled with that, we have the AI threat. Attackers are now using AI for phishing, for impersonation, for automation, making it far easier for probably the less technical attackers to actually carry out some of these attacks. And Emma will talk a little bit more about AI further into the presentation. And then you've got the consequences of a successful attack. So there's potentially the financial loss, probably operational disruption. There's the reputational damage because you've been hit by that attack. There's potentially legal, regulatory penalties. And there's also, what's often not talked about, is the emotional stress that comes with it. If you're a business owner or working within a business that's been attacked, you know, it's not a nice place to be. And it certainly sort of is a stressful place to be. And you have to, as a business leader, be able to sort of manage that. And we'll talk more about preparation during the course of this presentation. So I think the takeaway is cyber risk, it's a shared responsibility, but you've got to have clear ownership at leadership level, at that executive level. And I just put the question on the slide, you know, what keeps you awake at night when it comes to cyber risk? And I don't expect everybody to answer, but I certainly think that's something which you need to sort of consider and then potentially start putting mitigation in place to stop whatever it is that's particularly worrying you. So supply chain, I think it's really important to know your supply chain. It's probably broader than you think. That it includes any organization that you rely on. And that's so if we break that down, your core operations, so raw materials, transport, warehousing comes into that, your infrastructure, so that could be equipment suppliers, your maintenance, support services, that could be finance, insurance, operational vendors, whether that be software providers, printers, your logistics, and even down to facilities and your people services such as cleaners, caterers, couriers. Each one of these partners, they handle your data. Potentially they connect to your systems, and they can, by them being hit, it can potentially impact your operations. So I think the key takeaway here is you're only as secure as your weakest supplier link. So we have some statistics here, which were taken from a recent survey that was conducted, and it was really focusing on how well you know your supply chain. So it highlights for me a real critical issue. There's a real gap between how confident organizations feel about their supply chain cybersecurity and how prepared they actually are. And we generally see quite a consistent pattern that, the confidence is high, but action is low. And, taking some of these statistics, nearly 7 in 10 organizations believe they can recognize early warning signs of a supply chain incident. But only 1 in 10 is actually monitoring supply chain cybersecurity on a regular basis. So again, confidence is strong, ongoing visibility and assurances are clearly lacking. 86% of organizations do not enforce a minimum cybersecurity standard for their suppliers. So this means most businesses rely on third parties without clearly defining what secure looks like. So again, that increases their exposure to third-party risk. 80% are reactive and not proactive. So even after experiencing a cybersecurity incident, 80% of small and micro businesses still haven't implemented proactive measures, which basically shows for me a reactive mindset and that lessons are not being translated into stronger defenses. And then 73% of organizations feel well informed about supply chain cyber threats, but then only 25% have actually conducted a formal cyber risk or business impact assessment. So awareness isn't being translated into structured risk management, and that's sort of supported by the bottom right box, which reinforces this. And lastly, 70% of organizations do not include supply chain risks in business continuity or disaster recovery plans. So when the attack happens and that disruption hits, many of these are just not going to be prepared to respond effectively. So I guess a couple of key takeaways from this slide is the common thread here is a clear disconnect. There's that perceived confidence, but there's a low operational readiness. Understanding your supply chain isn't just about awareness, it's about continuous monitoring, having standards and integrating risk and resilience into your planning. And I think closing this gap is essential to reducing cyber risk. And that really sits at the sort of leadership level. So supply chain risks, what we're talking about? Business email compromise, that's probably the most widespread one. So the attackers will impersonate suppliers to redirect payments. And only last week, I sat on a panel at an event, and I was joined with somebody who'd suffered from this. They'd run their own business, and they were actually brave enough to stand there and actually talk about their experiences. I think it really stunned the audience into silence, listening to the emotion in the way he spoke. But what happened there was his credentials were compromised, and what they did, they sat on his system for over 3 months, and they waited until that really big deal was about to go down. And then they redirected emails, and effectively a very large payment was made to a supplier. And and as a result, his business almost went under, and it was a really difficult time for him. So I think it's really important to understand that this is a common thing, and if your credentials are compromised, it's easy for the attacker, say the attacker, for the criminals to do. Then there's the potential of compromised supplier credentials, where hackers gain access potentially through trusted accounts. Malicious software updates, where legitimate updates are used as a delivery mechanism for malware. You have ransomware, which could potentially come through a third-party provider, whether that be a managed service provider or the fact that you're sharing your systems with a partner organization. And you've also got data leakage. So potentially, if your supplier is breached, your sensitive data is exposed. So these are all sort of risks that relate directly to your supply chain. So supply chain resilience considerations. I mean, I think the first thing I need to say is that the National Cybersecurity Centre, which is the government arm of cybersecurity, they provide guidance in relation to how you can sort of improve your supply chain resilience. But I'll just mention a few things. So I think it's really important to integrate your supplier risk into a business continuity and disaster recovery planning, and also assess your vendor's risk posture. What access do they have to your systems, to your network? How secure are they? And also monitor that continuously, not just at onboarding. And for me, it's really important to promote transparency and communication across your partner network. I think I've seen it over the years where people have had a cyber attack and they try and deny it, they try and hide it, they try and sweep it under the carpet. There's two things there. One, that then means the criminals are able to put more pressure on you. Two, what it means is, sorry, excuse me, let me grab a drink of water. Yeah, they're able to put more pressure on you. And two, ultimately, it's rare that you won't actually get found out anyway. So all you're doing is denying inevitable. So getting on that front foot, for me, is important. Also, think about setting minimum security requirements for your suppliers. Embed cybersecurity into your procurement processes, into your contracts, where you can put clear responsibilities, breach reporting expectations. And for me, I guess the takeaway I'd like from this slide is cyber resilience depends on proactive supplier governance, not just trusting people to do the right thing. So I'm going to sort of take a little break there, and Emma's going to take over.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Again, talking about emerging AI risks and going on further from what Paul was talking about at the start, introduced at the start. All of this is governance and managing risk. You can have the technical elements to this, and obviously businesses do. But I think the main thing the key point from this as we're going through as this whole presentation is that governance first. Just get the basics right. Let's just get everything all in place and have some understanding of the risks to your business. And then we can start introducing technical controls to help with that once we know what the risks are. So emerging AI risks. AI is obviously changing the way that the threat landscape looks now with regards to cyber attacks. It's not more now that you need to spend more money in increasing, kind of keep up the spend, I guess, with how AI is changing and how those attacks are happening. This is about, again, just getting right back down to basics. You need to start looking at discipline around governance. You need to start looking at, are your devices patched? Do you have strong access controlled? Is MFA in use for all accounts? It's just getting down to that, your baseline, and actually making sure that is secure and everyone is talking about it, that will actually prevent against emerging AI risks. So what I want you to kind of take away from that is that you don't need to go out and spend lots of money. You don't need to have all of these fancy technical, implementations in place. You first need to actually just get down to the basic. Start thinking about how can we just make sure that we're getting the easy points right. I talk about cyber essentials a lot in the 5 controls. If you kind of implement cyber essentials as a day-to-day and not see that as a tick box exercise, cyber essentials is really good at protecting and helping secure your business with layering defense. If you're using it as that day I'm secure because I now have a certification that says I have CE, then obviously that's going to make a big difference. That is not securing your business. That is not making a difference. You have to talk and implement this day to day within your industry, business, whatever you're in, sector, sorry, so that you're actually making a difference on the floor to protect against AI. So again, Paul was talking about phishing. Phishing is not going away. Breaches surveyed in 25-26 found that phishing remained the most common type of breach attack, with 38% of businesses experiencing this. So AI is making this faster, the wording better, more believable, more personalized, more in line and targeting when it's the most precious time for you to answer an email. Phishing has not changed. AI, the way it's doing it, isn't done anything technical, more advanced. What it's actually doing is making it look better. So again, this comes down to the human aspect of your employees that can kind of see that now and start thinking more about, okay, so I'm not looking out for those emails that look pretty obvious. They're a phishing exercise, right? Or that somebody's just trying to implement an attack and they're saying this, I'm the person from Africa and I've got all of this money and you need to click on this to actually claim this money that I can give to you. It's more personalized, it's more targeted, and the wording is clearer. So that's how AI is changing the phishing context. So this is now making it harder to spot and improving the quality and the relevance of the attack. So you need to be more vigilant. The risk is not using an AI tool. So when we're talking about AI misuse inside the organization, it's about having control over that data that's being entered. So it's not about stopping the use of AI tools. It's not about telling your staff that they can't use them at all to actually help them with their work, because everyone is using it on a day-to-day basis now. And whether it's just checking emails, checking grammar, rewriting something so it's a bit more professional, it's going to be used. What you actually need to do is make sure that you have up-to-date policies in place and the right procedures. Start thinking about, have you spoken to your staff? Do you talk to your employees and say to them, yeah, okay, this is fine, but you can use it in this case, but you cannot use it in the case of adding sensitive data or company data. Just having that awareness and the discussions is where you're actually going to reduce AI misuse inside your organization. When was the last time you looked or updated your acceptable use policy? Have you considered the fact of now actually I have this policy in place that was there 2 years ago, but does it include anything with regards to AI? You need to actually have that implemented and in place, so then you can use that as part of the disciplinary process going forward if something is wrong. So somebody's also accountable for that, and your employees understand that, yes, okay, if I do use these tools, but I misuse them, I am accountable for the actions from that process. Update a risk register. Risk register isn't always about your assets, it's about your software and the tools that you use. That should be included. Your asset list. If you pay for as a business to have AI enterprise, then that becomes part of your asset list. And then again, that flows back into your risk register. So it's not about not using AI. This is about that there was a lack of visibility. So let's remove that. Let's actually bring that back to the table and say, yes, we know you're using AI. We understand that it's great for helping you speed up your working day or different processes that you have. But let's be visible with that. Let's actually talk about what it is that we're doing with it. what we can do with it and what we shouldn't do with it. So why is this a board issue? So even if the mistake is made by an employee, the organisation remains accountable for personal data entered into AI tools. So AI use still needs governance, it needs approved tools, and it needs clear rules and evidence of control. The organisation will still have to answer for how that data was handled. So again, if you go back to that employee and they put in data into an AI tool, into a system, the actual organisation is accountable for that, which is why you should have your policies and procedures in place so that you're saying, yep, okay, we have allowed this. This is what we don't allow. So we have controls in place. So the ICO then can see that you are accountable for the AI systems and the data is allowed within that system. You need to make sure as well that you're training your employees on this issue too. So, and again, also not only your employees, but you also as the top, the board, also need to understand how this affects you, how this AI risks affects data protection, contracts, reputational damage, if something happens within that. So you need to be more aware as a whole, as a business, everyone in that business should be aware of the use of AI and what that actually means. And have a transparency AI policy within the organization so people can actually read it, understand that, and just go, right, okay, we're on board with this now as well. We understand the repercussions if we enter data into a tool that we shouldn't do. So leadership and governance and policy then. So cyber risk cannot sit informally in IT. I think that is something that's still considered as when anybody mentions cyber, that it's an IT problem. It isn't an IT problem. Cyber and cyber risk, sorry, it is across the whole business, the organization, and it needs to have clear executive, sorry, ownership. And it needs to be from the top, where people at the top actually see that, okay, yeah, we need to lead from here. It starts with us. So you need to assign a cyber risk to a named senior owner, someone at the top that can take accountability and responsibility for that. Define who makes decisions during an incident. Make policies practical, understood and enforceable, and ensure suppliers support resilience but do not replace accountability. Review risks, incidents and controls at the leadership level. If you don't know who is accountable for something, then when something goes wrong, who is going to take ownership of that? That's where you really need to start thinking from the top level in governance. Everything should start from the top and flow down. And as you'll see as we're going through in the presentation, there's another section on people and how they behave. And people need to see that people at the top are actually taking this seriously and they're actually implementing the changes and they're actually acting on what the policies are saying. So it's not a case of you do as I say and I'll do whatever I need to do. This is about taking that leadership and showing the behavior that's acceptable as you're actually going through the ranks within an organization. So cyber as a business risk. Once ownership is clear, the next step is recognizing what the risk actually affects. Cyber is not only about computers or technical controls. It is about understanding how it can stop businesses operating, delay income, affect customers and damage trust. This is why it needs to sit the business risk of planning. And I think if we go back to the whole of this, going from what Paul was saying all the way from the beginning, is that cyber risk is a business risk and that it should be part of your business continuity plan, your disaster recovery plan. And you should be looking at all of the different types of incidents that can disrupt operation and then what that actually means to your business. Where does it land? Or when Paul was discussing about somebody could nearly finish their business when they, gave out money from an email compromise. How does your business come back? What plans do you have in place? How do you get back up and running? So you need to really think of that as from the key starting point from any business. So cyber incidents then disrupts operational and revenue, and these risks affect business continuity. So it's not just systems, it's not about your IT systems going down. Supplier breaches can disrupt your own services. Think about if you're only using one type of supplier for a product, say, and they actually are breached, or they go under, they are no longer in business. If you only have that one supplier, then how will you be able to carry on your business if you need that product to keep trading? Think about in your business continuity, okay, so maybe we should have 2 or 3 suppliers that provide these products so that if something happens to one, we still got a fallback. Data loss then can create legal and contractual and reputational impact. So you have to think about that too, like putting maybe confidentiality labels on your data, on your business documentation, so that there's less likely of that actually leaving your business and actually anything happening with that. Taking out insurance then, and making sure you have client confidence depending on evidence of control. So having all of these controls in place through risk management, and again, bringing in all of the different types of risks, showing that you've got those types of controls and that when something happens, this is what you're going to do. So cyber risk should be reviewed as part of the business risk planning. I know when you do the planning of risks, it's usually an annual task. I think these days, what I recommend to other companies is that, yes, you can annually look all over your policies and your processes that you have in place, but really you should start be thinking about them quarterly, even if it's just a quick review of them. And again, as AI is an example, just having a quick look at your policies and going, yeah, there's nothing in there with regards to AI. Or if something has happened and now you have some more understanding of a type of risk, then putting that back into your policies and then reviewing that then and actually sharing that again. So you're actually learning from anything, the risk that has happened, and you're not just saying, okay, this has happened, we can recover from it. But now that you have that and you've reported it, you can actually look back and think, well, where can I make those changes so I can stop this from happening again? So governance failure patterns. So most instances are accidental. And again, when we're talking about that phishing, they are driven by pressure and workload. I often say sometimes to people that ultimately we just want to do our job. Your employees want to do their job that they've been tasked that day. If their workload become too heavy and they have a lot of pressure on them, then they're liable to make mistakes. And that's where the accidental instance will come from. So think about your employees as well, and think about how you're running your business, and are you putting too much pressure, or is there too much pressure building? And think about how you can release that to make the employees feel less rushed and less likely to click a link, less likely to send a payment off without checking. Access control is more reliable than trust alone. So cyber responsibility is often unclear or assumed. And again, when you start using the terms of cyber within an organization that doesn't necessarily run cyber every day, people kind of either blanket or they think that's the IT's responsibility. It's nothing to do with me. So you have to have that culture, that conversation where you talk to your employees and everyone can actually say, hey, yes, do you know about this? Oh, yeah, look out for this. Yeah, I've spotted this as well with regard to the way that this phishing link has been shown. So make sure that you check in. Having that culture, the conversations within your organization actually improves your governance overall. So when people are actually talking about governance, talking about different things, they're actually then living it and not just reading a policy and ticking it off and saying, yeah, I've read that policy, I'll sign that. They're actually living that day to day. And then that ensures then that you're adding that extra layer of defense to your organization. Risks are accepted without broad visibility. So incidents are handled technically and not strategically. These are all failure patterns. So you have to think about different ways of how you can actually change these. And actually you can turn these from weaknesses, but into strengths. So why policies fail and how vigilance is built. again, this is something that I come across a lot. People write policies. Somebody will put a policy out there and say, right, this is what I wanted to do. I'm going to send it out. Everyone's going to sign this and they're going to follow that. But that policy could be written by somebody that doesn't actually either one, work on the floor, and let's just make it easy terms. They're not there. They see the policy, they've written it really well, it does what they expect it to do, but when you actually put that into a working condition and working practices, it falls short. Staff are under pressure and the secure process is slower or unclear, they might bypass it. So if there's a policy in place that makes their life harder, their day-to-day working, and they can find a way, or they will find a way to actually circumvent that policy and do whatever they need to do so they can get their job done. So you have to think about, well, okay, so this is a policy. Let's take that to the floor. Let's do a scenario. Let's test this policy and let's see if it works. Only by then can you actually have a policy that does what it says on the tin, so to speak, and actually works. And then it shows people what they actually should do then, rather than just saying, oh, this is what I think should happen within a policy. You can actually get the results and people will actually think about that and go, yeah, this policy works and I will follow it. And that's better all around for everyone. Again, with people, that how they look at things and when they're running in a business, policies seem to be a point of, again, a tick box exercise when they just think, oh, I've just signed this off. You need to make sure that those conversations, the cyber culture, is actually what's being enforced on the floor. So again, bringing the policies in, but bringing it into a conversation. That way you're keeping it live, and you're keeping it actually going. So promoting secure behaviors. So again, when I was saying earlier that it starts from the top, you can't expect your employees to follow the rules if you don't. There should be a clear cyber culture, not just training once a year, not just tick policies, not just follow this process. You should make sure that those conversations are happening and that behavior is seen. And it starts from the leaders. It starts from the people at the top. Be on the floor, talk to your staff, show them, the behavior that is acceptable, and tell them what isn't acceptable, not just having documents and just asking them to sign and follow, just having those conversations. That's where you're going to promote secure behaviors, and you're going to get a different feel of your employees being on the floor and how they look at cybersecurity, and how they actually follow that as well. Rather than it's an IT business problem, it then becomes, no, actually, this is everyone's problem and this is everyone's way that they should look at things. I'm going to pass you back to Paul and take back from there. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Emma. Okay, so we're going to sort of come to the end of a few slides now and really discuss what does good look like. And it's a recap of some of the things that we've been speaking about throughout this presentation. So leadership and accountability. It's really important that cyber risk be assigned to a named executive or board member. Quite recently, I worked with a small business. And they didn't have cyber on the risk register. So that meant that cyber wasn't being discussed in the boardroom, and it means that they're more vulnerable, and they don't, and because they don't understand the risk, they haven't put it onto the risk register. So it's also important to have clear incident escalation pathways. As Emma has said a number of times, policies need to reflect work in practice, and also it's about having evidence ready, whether that be for regulators, for insurers, or customers. And then you've got policy and governance frameworks being aligned with recognised standards, whether that be GDPR, if NIS2 covers you, or ISO 27001, and then supplier contracts. Should include cybersecurity clauses, breach notification requirements, but also ensure that you do your due diligence on the cyber and data protection posture of those in your supply chain. And I just want to sort of mention also that it's becoming more and more prevalent that organizations are asking you to have cyber essentials or cyber essentials plus in place before they will do business with you. And there's a real push at a government sort of level for the larger organizations to implement this. So bit by bit, this is coming down to everybody. Also, it's important to your policies are reviewed regularly, whether that be acceptable use, AI governance, remote access, and that people understand the reason for those policies being in place. I'm aware of an example fairly recently where somebody used they were allowed to take their work computer home, work remotely, and they decided they were interested in a particular boxing match. Decided they didn't want to sort of pay for it, so using their work computer, streamed the service from an online site. Unfortunately, malware was downloaded as a result or during that streaming. And then when they sort of reconnected to their work network, unfortunately, ransomware hit that company. So takeaway from this, good means accountability, alignment, evidence, and not just documentation. And then we have risk management, assurance, behavior, risk management and assurance. So it's important to conduct regular documented risk assessments, consider carrying out penetration testing and vulnerability scans. Certainly phishing simulations would be something, probably not just annually, probably more frequently. And it's important that that there's a culture of if you've made a mistake that you report it quickly. So if somebody does click on a phishing email as part of a simulation, it's about educating them rather than sort of berating them. Also review your cyber insurance for coverage gaps. What incident response support is within that insurance, and having a certification demonstrates due diligence to boards, other sort of stakeholders as well. Behavior and culture, I think this is a really big one as well, because again, I worked with a company fairly recently, and they did have cybersecurity training for their staff, for all of their organization. But when I sort of looked into it, I think it was about 40%, 50% of the staff had done it. However, none of the executive level directors had done it, and half the management hadn't done it. So think about the message that sends. And also staff training, it goes beyond awareness. This is about understanding human behavior, understanding social engineering tactics. If you understand that, you can question potentially that phishing email that comes in. It's also about implementing insider threat controls, providing quarterly cyber reports, so it's discussed at a board level, and also something which I think really happens, but it's certainly something I've learned from my policing career is actually learn from incidents, have a lessons learned, have a review of what's happened, and even if it's a near miss, still have a review, because what you don't want is that near miss next time to actually result in a successful attack. So cybersecurity for me is as much about people and culture as technology. And then technology and controls, have those core controls in place, multi-factor authentication. I mentioned the victim that I was on a panel with earlier. The reason that his credentials were compromised was because he didn't have MFA in place. So they were able to either trick him or guess his password, and that's what led ultimately to his business almost collapsing. Ensure this patch management, ensure you've got backups, ensure your configurations are secure. Use sort of KPIs and metrics for your governance and your decision making. And there's frameworks and certifications out there. We've mentioned cyber essentials. I think we're moving to an environment where that's going to be almost compulsory if you want to have a successful business going forward. And you've also got ISO 27001 and other sort of governance and measures that you can put in place. For me, sort of certification shows that this commitment and oversight, it doesn't guarantee you security, unfortunately. which brings me on to sort of that incident response and crisis readiness piece. You know, it's so important to have an incident response plan, and actually to exercise it. So again, harking back to my sort of policing career, you know, I led murder investigations and kidnap investigations. I didn't just sort of put my hand up and say I'd like to do that. I went through training, I went through exercising, and when it actually came to it, it's still a tough place to be. But I'd had the training, I'd practiced this, and what that meant is that decision making becomes easier because I sort of understand what's happening. If you haven't exercised and you don't have a plan, then all of a sudden you're in that sort of crisis situation. You know, it's a really tough place to be, especially if you don't have that plan. And, you know, as part of that, prepare sort of communication templates, because you're going to want to keep your clients informed, potentially regulators informed, but also your employees, keep them informed. And, you know, have a playbook for some of these attacks. So have a ransomware playbook, for example. So, you know, you can consider those legal considerations, insurance coordination, reputation management, communication strategies. And I guess the one thing I need to sort of highlight is have that plan, but have it printed off in a physical format. Don't have it as a Word document, because if you get hit with ransomware, your plan is unavailable. And the last point about a plan is make sure everybody knows about the plan and understands their role in that plan. So for me, preparedness and response capability are just as critical as prevention. And we're sort of coming to an end of the presentation now. And I think I just want to sort of reinforce the fact that this is an executive responsibility, not an IT issue. We'll move on to questions shortly, but I suppose we just want to sort of cover some of the services that Emma and I sort of deliver. So as far as Norton Consultancy Limited is concerned, I bring executive briefings. So often the board level, executive level don't understand the risks, which is why they're not putting that sort of so many other sort of measures in place. I can come in and talk about the experience I have from policing and the reality of the situation, which will better inform them and enable them to make better decisions. I can come and sort of help with cyber preparedness, offering a challenge. I can provide cyber exercising and also staff awareness training. And Emma, do you want to cover positive cyber solutions?
Yeah, so we cover cyber essentials like I discussed earlier, and I asked me cyber assurance level 1 and 2. Courses then that we cover currently, ISO 27001, we have the foundation and lead implementer. There's also kind of a free course on there with regards to cyber essentials and common pitfalls. And I think what I actually want to go back to, because I think I kind of missed the point as I was going through the presentation there as well, is that, yeah, to kind of reiterate what Paul is saying, this is governance should be first, and it needs to start from the top, and then it needs to filter down. Starting from the executives and actually looking into your risks and risk management and the use of AI, and how your floor is operating within regards to policies and procedures. You've got to get that right from the beginning. I think you can have all the technical capabilities, all of the SOC, the network infrastructure. We can have all of these firewalls implemented, but if you don't get the basics right, you're still leaving yourself open. And we're talking about AI as an actual new threat. It's not a new threat as such. It's going to use all the same threats that you've been currently experiencing or that are out there, but it just makes it faster and harder to actually spot. So even though it is new as in the way that everyone's talking about it, it's still a threat, and it should just be seen as a threat that you would look at any other type of threat that could attack your company, your organization. And definitely looking into your, even just having that baseline of cyber essentials. And I asked me cyber assurance. I will say about that. I don't think many people actually know what that is, and what it actually means. Everyone talks about cyber essentials and cyber essentials plus, where you have scanning on your network. Cyber essentials assurance to me, again, I think is really where you should go to next. it doesn't just look then at the cyber essentials steps that you've put into place. It starts asking why, and why have you got them in place, and how have you got them? How are they being initiated across the organization? Where's the evidence of all of this that's in place? So for me, ICAL is really the next step that people should look into. But yeah, that's it, and that's what we cover. Thanks, Paul.
Okay, thanks, Emma. Okay, so that's it. I hope it's been a useful webinar, and we're open to sort of any questions.